Admiral Jake Morrison walked through the long hallway leading to the Galactic Council chambers. His black uniform was pressed and clean, his gray hair combed back neatly. Behind him walked 3 other humans, all wearing the same dark blue uniforms of Earth's diplomatic corps. They had traveled for weeks to reach this place, the center of galactic government, where over 50 different alien species made decisions that affected billions of lives across thousands of worlds. The doors to the great chamber opened with a soft hiss. Morrison stepped inside and immediately felt small. The room was massive, designed to hold representatives from species that ranged from tiny insect-like beings to creatures the size of buildings. Floating platforms held delegates from races that lived in gas clouds. Pools of liquid methane provided seating for species that breathed poison. The air itself was carefully controlled to support dozens of different biological needs at once. Morrison walked to the center of the chamber where a small platform waited for him. Around him, hundreds of alien eyes, sensors, and awareness fields focused on the human delegation. Some creatures made chittering sounds. Others hummed low musical notes. A few species that communicated through color changes flashed patterns of what Morrison's translator earpiece told him were expressions of amusement. The council chairman was an ancient being called Mordak. He looked like a giant turtle that had learned to walk upright. His shell was covered in scars from battles fought before humans had discovered fire. When he spoke, his voice was deep and slow, like distant thunder. "Admiral Morrison of the human species," Mordak said, "you have requested an emergency session of the Galactic Council. State your business." Morrison straightened his shoulders and looked around the chamber. 50 years ago, humanity had been invited to join the galactic community. They had signed the Galactic Accords, agreements that limited military development and required peaceful resolution of conflicts. For 5 decades, humans had followed these rules while alien species had not. "Honored members of the Council," Morrison began, "I come before you today with a final warning. For 50 years, humanity has followed the Galactic Accords. We have limited our military forces as required. We have sought peaceful solutions to every conflict. We have honored every treaty and agreement we have signed." The Zephyrian ambassador interrupted with a sound like wind chimes laughing. The crystalline being was tall and beautiful, made of what looked like living glass that caught and reflected light in rainbow patterns. "Admiral Morrison, your species barely qualifies for space travel. You have managed to colonize a few dozen worlds in 50 years. Most species accomplish that in their first decade of galactic membership. What exactly are you warning us about?" Morrison kept his face calm, but his hands tightened into fists behind his back. "The Krex Dominion has attacked 17 of our colony worlds in the past 6 months. They have killed over 30,000 human civilians. They have taken another 50,000 as slaves. We have brought these crimes to this council's attention repeatedly. Nothing has been done." Ambassador Vextar of the Krex Dominion rose from his coiled position. The serpentine alien was 20 feet long, covered in black scales that seemed to absorb light. His yellow eyes glowed with amusement as he spoke. "The humans occupy worlds that could be better used by superior species. We are simply claiming territory that is being wasted. This is natural law. The strong take from the weak. It has always been so. We have tried diplomacy," Morrison continued, ignoring the snake-like alien's hissing laughter. "We have filed formal complaints. We have requested mediation through proper channels. The Krex continue their attacks. Now other species are beginning to follow their example. The Veltari Empire has begun raiding our trade routes. The hegemony of Zathor has demanded tribute from our border colonies." Chairman Mordak raised one massive flipper. "Admiral Morrison, the Galactic Accords exist to maintain peace and order. If your species followed the guidance of more experienced civilizations, these conflicts could be avoided. Perhaps you should consider relocating your colonies to less contested regions of space." Morrison felt something cold settle in his chest. Around the chamber, alien delegates were making sounds that his translator identified as agreement, amusement, and dismissal. These beings, these creatures that claimed to represent galactic civilization, were telling him that humanity should simply accept being murdered and enslaved because they were not strong enough to defend themselves. "Chairman Mordak," Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, "I want to make sure I understand the Council's position. You are telling me that because humanity is not powerful enough to stop other species from attacking us, we should accept these attacks as natural and proper." "Essentially, yes," Mordak replied. "The galaxy is not a peaceful place, Admiral. Species survive by being strong enough to defend themselves, or by accepting the protection of stronger allies. Your species has chosen neither path. Morrison nodded slowly. Behind him, he could hear his aide, Captain Lisa Park, shifting nervously. She had argued against this course of action during the long trip to the council chambers. She had wanted to try more diplomatic approaches, more formal complaints, more appeals to alien concepts of justice and law. Morrison had known better. He had studied alien psychology for 30 years. He understood how the galactic community really worked. The strong did whatever they wanted. The weak served the strong or died. Everything else was just pretty words designed to make the system sound civilized. In that case, Morrison said, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Accords. Effective immediately, the chamber fell silent. Even the ambient sounds of different atmospheric systems seemed to quiet. For a moment, Morrison could hear his own heartbeat in the sudden stillness. Then the laughter began. It started with the Zephyrian ambassador's wind chime giggles. Other species joined in with their own expressions of amusement. Chittering insects, humming gas beings, flashing light creatures, all finding humanity's declaration hilarious. Chairman Mordak's deep voice cut through the noise. Admiral Morrison, your species' withdrawal from the Accords is noted in the official record. However, you should understand that the Accords exist primarily to protect weaker species from stronger ones. By withdrawing from our protection, humanity has simply ensured that you will be conquered more quickly by those who wish to claim your territory. Morrison looked around the chamber one more time. He memorized the faces and forms of the beings who had just condemned his species to extinction through their inaction and cruelty. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the massive room. You have been warned, he said simply. From this moment forward, humanity will respond to aggression with the full extent of our capabilities. What happens next is entirely your responsibility, not ours. The alien laughter grew louder. Several delegates were sharing what Morrison's translator told him were jokes about human military capabilities. The Krex ambassador was already making plans to accelerate their conquest of human space. The Veltari representative was calculating how many human slaves they could take before other species claimed shares of the conquest. Morrison turned and walked toward the chamber's exit. His three companions fell into step behind him. As they reached the great doors, Captain Lisa Park caught up to him. Sir, she whispered urgently, are you certain about this course of action? Without the Accords, every major power in the galaxy will see humanity as fair game. They'll wipe us out within months. Morrison paused at the doorway and looked back at the chamber full of aliens who were still laughing at humanity's withdrawal. His expression was calm, but Lisa had known him long enough to recognize the cold fury in his eyes. Lisa, he said quietly, these creatures think they understand what humanity is capable of. They believe we have spent 50 years under their protection because we are weak and primitive. They assume our technology is limited because we have followed their rules about military development. He smiled, and Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She had never seen her commander look quite like this before. They are about to learn how wrong they have been about everything, Morrison said. 50 years ago, humanity agreed to limit our military development to maintain galactic peace. What these aliens never understood is that we agreed to limit our military deployment, not our military research. Lisa's eyes widened as the implications hit her. Sir, are you saying that we have been developing weapons and technology in secret this entire time? Morrison's smile grew colder. Captain, while humanity has been playing by their rules in public, our scientists and engineers have been studying every alien technology we could find. We have been preparing for this day since the moment we signed the Accords. These creatures wanted to see what happens when humanity stops holding back. He looked once more at the chamber full of aliens who had just signed their own death warrants through arrogance and cruelty. Now they're going to find out. 3 weeks after Admiral Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, the Krex Dominion decided to end what they called the human problem, once and for all. Fleet Admiral Vexmore commanded the largest military force the Dominion had assembled in over 2 centuries. 312 warships filled the void of space at the edge of human territory, their black hulls bristling with weapons designed to crack planets and boil atmospheres. Vexmore coiled his massive serpentine body around the command throne of his flagship, the Death's Promise. The ship was 3 miles long and carried enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. Around him, his bridge crew worked at control stations designed for beings with scales, claws, and poison sacs instead of soft human skin. "Report on human defensive positions," Vexmore hissed to his intelligence officer. "Minimal resistance detected," Fleet Admiral, the smaller Krex, replied, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the bridge's recycled air. "Our long-range sensors show only 12 human vessels moving to intercept our advance. They appear to be the same class of ships we have encountered in previous raids." Vexmore's laughter was a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe. 12 ships against our armada? Either the humans have completely lost their minds, or they are more pathetic than we originally believed. What the Krex could not know was that those 12 human ships represented something entirely new in galactic warfare. The lead vessel, designated Thunderbolt, looked almost identical to the frigates that had been defending human colonies for decades. Almost identical, but not quite the same. Captain Ryan Cross stood on the bridge of the Thunderbolt, watching the massive alien fleet approach on his tactical displays. "All ships, this is Thunderbolt Actual," Cross announced over the secure communications channel. "Today we show the galaxy what happens when humans stop pretending to be weak. Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for. Show them what Earth's children can do when we're finally allowed to fight back." The bridge crew of the Thunderbolt was smaller than what most alien species would expect. Humans had learned to build ships that required fewer people to operate, relying instead on advanced computer systems and artificial intelligence networks that the galactic community did not know existed. Lieutenant Amy Stone sat at the weapons control station, her fingers dancing over controls that looked simple, but controlled destructive forces beyond alien comprehension. "Captain," Stone reported, "all weapon systems are online and ready. The new displacement drives are functioning within normal parameters. Defensive systems are at full power." Cross nodded and activated his communications array. "Fleet Admiral Vexmore of the Krex Dominion. This is Captain Ryan Cross of the Earth Defense Force. You have entered human space with hostile intent. You have 30 seconds to reverse course and withdraw your forces, or we will consider your fleet a legitimate military target." The response came immediately, broadcast on all frequencies so that every human ship could hear Vexmore's contemptuous reply. "Captain Cross, I have over 300 warships under my command. You have 12. Surrender now and I will ensure that your deaths are swift. Continue this foolishness and I will feed your crews to my soldiers while they are still alive." Cross looked around his bridge at the men and women who had trained for this moment their entire careers. These people had grown up knowing that humanity was considered weak by galactic standards. They had lived with the shame of watching alien species raid human colonies, while their own government was forced to file useless diplomatic protests. Today all of that would change. 30 seconds are up, Admiral," Cross replied calmly. "You were warned." The Krex fleet opened fire first, just as Cross had expected they would. Hundreds of plasma cannons and particle beam weapons lanced out across the darkness of space, their combined firepower enough to vaporize asteroids and boil away planetary atmospheres. The energy beams reached the position where the human ships had been moments before and found nothing but empty vacuum. "Where did they go?" Vexmore demanded, his yellow eyes scanning the tactical displays that showed no trace of the human vessels. The answer came when the Thunderbolt materialized directly behind the Death's Promise, so close that Vexmore could see the human ship through the viewing ports of his own bridge. The displacement drive technology that humanity had developed in secret allowed their ships to step outside normal spacetime for brief periods, effectively teleporting across interstellar distances in the blink of an eye. "Impossible," Vexmore whispered, staring at the human vessel that should not have been able to exist in that position. Captain Cross's voice cut through every communication channel on every Krex ship simultaneously, somehow bypassing encryption systems that had taken the Dominion centuries to develop. "Admiral Vexmore, your fleet is now surrounded. Look at your sensors. Look carefully." Vexmore's bridge crew frantically worked their control stations, trying to understand how 12 human ships had suddenly become visible in positions throughout the Krex formation. Each human vessel had used displacement technology to teleport into the heart of the alien fleet, placing themselves at point-blank range with targets that had no chance to maneuver or escape. "This is still 12 ships against over 300, Vexmore snarled, though his voice carried less confidence than before. "All ships fire at will. Destroy these human vermin." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every Krex vessel that could bring weapons to bear opened fire simultaneously. The space around each human ship filled with plasma bolts, particle beams, and exotic energy weapons that could melt through the armor of any known starship. The combined firepower of the Krex fleet struck the 12 human vessels with enough force to crack moons. When the energy storm cleared, all 12 human ships remained exactly where they had been, completely undamaged. Lieutenant Stone looked up from her control station with a smile that would have terrified the Krex if they could have seen it. "Captain, their weapons are having no effect on our defensive systems. The energy absorption matrices are working perfectly. In fact, our shield generators are actually getting stronger from absorbing their attacks." Cross nodded. Humanity had spent 50 years studying alien technology, learning how every weapon system worked, understanding the physics behind each type of attack. Human defensive systems had been designed specifically to counter every known form of galactic warfare. But more than that, they had been designed to learn and adapt in real time, becoming more effective the longer a battle continued. "Admiral Vexmore," Cross announced, his voice now carrying across the entire Krex fleet. "You have just demonstrated why the Galactic Accords existed in the first place. You assumed that humanity was weak because we followed the rules. You assumed that our technology was primitive because we allowed you to see only what we wanted you to see. You have made a critical error in judgment." "What error?" Vexmore managed to ask, though his voice was no longer the confident hiss it had been minutes earlier. "You brought conventional weapons to fight an unconventional enemy," Cross replied. "Lieutenant Stone, show the Admiral what human weapons can do when we stop holding back." The Thunderbolt fired a single shot from its primary weapon system. The energy beam that emerged was unlike anything the Krex had ever encountered. Instead of simple plasma or particle acceleration, the human weapon used controlled quantum disruption to simply delete matter from existence. The Krex heavy cruiser that was targeted did not explode or break apart. It simply stopped existing, leaving behind only empty space where a 3,000-ton warship had been moments before. "Impossible," Vexmore repeated, but now his voice was barely a whisper. The other 11 human ships opened fire in sequence, each demonstrating a different aspect of humanity's secret weapons development. Temporal displacement beams aged enemy hulls from new construction to rusted scrap in seconds. Nanite clouds converted Krex vessels into remote-controlled allies under human command. Gravitational pulse weapons collapsed enemy ships into dense balls of compressed matter. Reality anchors prevented targeted vessels from using faster-than-light travel, trapping them in normal space where human weapons could reach them. Within 15 minutes, the Krex Dominion's greatest military fleet had been reduced to scattered debris, and a handful of ships fleeing at maximum speed toward the edge of human space. Only Admiral Vexmore's flagship remained intact, held in place by human tractor beams that used principles of physics the Krex did not understand. Vexmore found himself suddenly standing on the bridge of the Thunderbolt. Though he had no memory of leaving his own ship, Captain Cross stood before him, still calm, still completely in control of the situation. "How did I get here?" Vexmore asked, his serpentine form coiled defensively. "Transportation technology," Cross replied simply. "We can move people and objects across space as easily as we move our ships. Admiral, your fleet is destroyed. Your soldiers are dead. Your ships are scrap metal floating in space. But you are going to live because you have a job to do." "What job?" Cross stepped closer, and Vexmore could see something in the human's eyes that made his scales crawl with instinctive fear. "You are going to return to Krex space, Admiral. You are going to tell your government exactly what happened here today. You are going to explain to them that..." News of the Krex fleet's complete destruction spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On dozens of worlds and hundreds of space stations and aboard thousands of ships, alien beings struggled to understand what they had witnessed. The report seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. 312 Krex warships had engaged 12 human vessels, and only one damaged Krex ship had survived to tell the story. In the Galactic Council chambers, emergency sessions convened around the clock as representatives from major powers tried to comprehend the implications. The Zephyrian ambassador, his crystalline form now dimmed with worry instead of sparkling with amusement, addressed the assembled delegates. "The reports from Admiral Vexmore must be exaggerated," he chimed nervously. "No species could develop such advanced technology in secret. Our intelligence networks monitor all major technological developments across the galaxy." Chairman Mordak's ancient voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. Perhaps our intelligence networks were not as thorough as we believed. Or perhaps humanity is more skilled at deception than we gave them credit for. The Veltari representative, an energy being called Luxara, who existed as a floating cloud of controlled plasma, pulsed with agitated colors. One victory proves nothing. The humans may have surprised the Kreks with some new weapon, but they cannot have enough ships to challenge the combined might of the galaxy's great powers. Within hours of that declaration, the Galactic Council voted to authorize the creation of the largest military alliance in recorded history. 5 major species contributed their most powerful warships to what they called the Coalition Fleet. The Veltari Empire provided their reality-warping dreadnoughts. The hegemony of Zathor sent their planet-killing battle stations. The Zephyrian Federation contributed ships that could phase between dimensions. The Mordian Collective added vessels equipped with time-dilation weapons. The ancient Eternals emerged from their hidden worlds to lend their matter-conversion battleships to the cause. Over 1,500 vessels gathered at the edge of human space, representing technology accumulated over millions of years of galactic civilization. It was the most powerful military force ever assembled. Commanded by Admiral Kethvar of the Veltari Empire, a being whose species had conquered star systems when Earth's sun was still forming. The human response to this overwhelming display of force was swift and seemingly suicidal. Admiral Jake Morrison personally took command of humanity's defensive fleet, leading exactly 50 ships against the massive alien armada. But these were not the same vessels that had defeated the Krek's dominion. These ships were larger, sleeker, and carried weapon signatures that human sensors could barely analyze. Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Vengeance, watching as the Coalition fleet approached human space in a formation designed to inspire terror in any enemy. Behind him, Captain Amy Stone worked at a control station that looked deceptively simple but was connected to computer systems more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Admiral," Stone reported, "long-range sensors are analyzing the enemy fleet composition. We're detecting Veltari reality warpers, hegemony planet killers, Zephyrian phase ships, and at least 6 other classes of vessels we've never encountered in actual combat." Morrison nodded calmly. "How are our adaptive systems responding to the analysis?" "All weapon and defense protocols have been updated based on our intelligence files," Stone replied. "The AI systems are confident they can counter every known technology in the enemy fleet. Estimated time to total victory is 6 hours and 14 minutes. Morrison smiled at the precision of the estimate. Humanity had spent 5 decades studying every aspect of galactic technology, not just to understand how it worked, but to find ways to defeat it. Every weapon system, every defensive measure, every exotic physics principle used by alien civilizations had been analyzed, tested, and countered by human scientists working in secret facilities across 100 worlds. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," he announced over the fleet communication network. "Today we face the combined might of species that have ruled this galaxy for millions of years. They come here believing that superior numbers and ancient technology will allow them to destroy humanity. They are about to learn why Earth spent 50 years preparing for this exact moment." The Coalition fleet opened communications first, as Morrison had expected they would. Admiral Kethvar's voice carried the arrogance of a being whose species had never known defeat in 10,000 years of warfare. "Admiral Morrison of the human species, you face 1,500 warships representing the greatest military powers in galactic history. Surrender now, and your species will be allowed to exist as servants to your betters. Continue this futile resistance and humanity will be eliminated completely." Morrison's reply was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship in both fleets could hear his words. "Admiral Kethvar, I want you to understand something very important. 50 years ago, humanity joined the galactic community and agreed to follow the Galactic Accords. We limited our military development, sought peaceful solutions to conflicts, and tried to be good neighbors to everyone we encountered." He paused, letting his words register with the thousands of alien beings listening to the transmission. "In return, species like yours treated us as prey. You raided our colonies, enslaved our people, and dismissed our diplomatic protests as the whining of primitives. You made one critical error in your calculations, Admiral." "What error?" Kethvar demanded, though his voice carried less confidence than it had moments before. "You assumed that compliance meant weakness," Morrison replied. You thought that following the Accords meant we were incapable of defending ourselves. You never considered that we might be using those 50 years to study your technology, analyze your tactics, and prepare for the day when diplomacy would no longer be sufficient. The first shots of the battle came from the Coalition fleet, just as Morrison had predicted they would. 1,500 ships fired simultaneously, unleashing enough destruction to sterilize solar systems, reality warping beams, planet-killing energy cannons, time dilation fields, and dimensional phase weapons all converged. On the 50 human vessels, the human ships simply absorbed the attack and kept flying forward. Captain Stone looked up from her control station with an expression of professional satisfaction. "Admiral, enemy weapons are having no measurable effect on our defensive systems. Our shields are actually getting stronger from the energy absorption. All human vessels report 0 damage." Morrison had expected this result, but seeing it in action was still impressive. Human defensive technology did not simply block incoming attacks. It analyzed them, learned from them, and became more effective against similar weapons with each hit. The longer a battle continued, the more invulnerable human ships became. "Thank you, Captain," Morrison replied. "Now show them what happens when we stop being defensive." The Vengeance fired its primary weapon, a beam of coherent quantum energy that did not simply destroy matter but convinced it to stop existing according to the fundamental laws of physics. The Veltari dreadnought that was targeted did not explode, burn, or break apart. It simply vanished from reality as if it had never been built. The other 49 human ships opened fire in a carefully choreographed sequence, each demonstrating a different aspect of humanity's secret weapons development. Gravitational crushers compressed enemy vessels into spheres of super-dense matter. Temporal accelerators aged enemy hulls from new construction to ancient rust in seconds. Consciousness disruptors turned enemy crews into vegetables, leaving their ships intact but completely helpless. Dimensional anchors prevented targeted vessels from escaping into faster-than-light travel. But perhaps most terrifying of all was humanity's ability to turn enemy technology against itself. Human nanite clouds infected alien computer systems, rewriting their programming to serve human objectives. Krek ships that had survived their earlier defeat found themselves under human control, their own weapons turning against their former allies. Admiral Kethvar watched in growing horror as his invincible fleet was systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to have solutions for every weapon, countermeasures for every defense, and answers to technological challenges that had puzzled galactic civilization for millennia. "How is this possible?" he transmitted to Morrison, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Morrison's reply was calm and educational. "Admiral, your species spent millions of years perfecting your technology through trial and error. Humanity spent 50 years studying all of your mistakes and developing better solutions. We did not waste time reinventing weapons that already existed. We simply built improved versions that could defeat the originals." Within 6 hours, exactly as Captain Stone had predicted, the Coalition fleet was reduced to scattered debris and a few dozen ships fleeing at maximum speed toward the edges of human space. 1,500 vessels representing the combined military, might of the galaxy's greatest powers, had been neutralized by 50 human ships without a single human casualty. Admiral Kethvar found himself transported to the bridge of the Vengeance, standing before Morrison in a demonstration of technology his species could not begin to understand. The human ADMI. The destruction of the Coalition fleet sent shockwaves through every corner of galactic civilization. On 1,000 worlds, governments that had ruled for millions of years suddenly found themselves facing a threat they could not understand or defeat. Emergency councils met in secret chambers deep beneath planetary surfaces. Ancient beings who had slept through the rise and fall of entire civilizations awakened to study reports of humanity's impossible victories. In the deepest vaults of the hegemony capital world, Emperor Zavon stirred from his meditation chamber for the first time in 3 centuries. The massive insectoid ruler stood 20 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton covered in scars from battles fought when the galaxy was young. His compound eyes, each one larger than a human head, focused on the holographic displays that showed the aftermath of humanity's latest victory. "Impossible," Zavon clicked in the ancient language of his species. "No young race could develop such technology in mere decades. Our scientists have studied the fundamental laws of physics for 10 million years. His chief advisor, a smaller hegemony noble called Zektar, prostrated himself before the Emperor's throne. Great One, our intelligence networks have discovered disturbing information about human capabilities. They appear to have been conducting advanced research in secret for the entire duration of their membership in the galactic community. Zavan's mandibles clicked together, in what humans might have recognized as laughter, though the sound carried no humor. Research? Zektar, the hegemony possesses technology that predates most stars in this galaxy. We have weapons that can collapse solar systems and defenses that can withstand the birth of black holes. What could humans possibly have learned that we do not already know? The answer to that question would come sooner than the Emperor expected. Within days of his awakening, Zavan made a decision that would determine the fate of his ancient empire. The hegemony would mobilize every ship, every weapon, and every soldier in their vast military machine. They would demonstrate to the galaxy that some powers were too old, too strong, and too experienced to be challenged by upstart species like humanity. The armada that assembled at the edge of hegemony space was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Nearly 10,000 warships, some of them larger than moons, others so advanced they existed partially outside normal spacetime. Planet killers that could crack worlds with single shots, reality bombers that could delete entire star systems from existence, time ships that could attack enemies in the past before battles even began. Emperor Zavan commanded this force personally from his flagship, the Inevitable. The vessel was older than human civilization, larger than most cities, and equipped with technology that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than rules. Its weapons could sterilize galaxies. Its defenses had never been breached in 10 million years of warfare. The human response to this overwhelming display of ancient power seemed almost insulting in its modesty. Admiral Jake Morrison deployed exactly 100 ships to face the hegemony's might. But these vessels were different from anything humanity had shown before. They were sleek, dark, and seemed to bend light around their hulls in ways that made them difficult to see even on direct visual observation. Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Retribution, studying tactical displays that showed the approaching hegemony fleet in perfect detail. Every ship, every weapon, every defensive system was cataloged and analyzed by computer networks that operated faster than biological thought. "Admiral," reported Captain Steve Hughes from the weapons control station, "our analysis of the enemy fleet is complete. We're detecting technology that exceeds anything we've encountered before. Some of these hegemony ships appear to be wielding stellar-level energy outputs." Morrison nodded calmly. "Excellent. It's about time we face someone who might actually require us to make an effort." Hughes looked up from his displays with concern. "Sir, I'm not sure you understand the scale of what we're facing. The Emperor's flagship alone carries enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. Some of their weapons operate outside normal physics entirely." Morrison's smile was cold and confident. "Captain, humanity has spent 50 years studying every aspect of galactic technology, including hegemony artifacts that we acquired through various means. We know exactly how their systems work, and more importantly, we know how to defeat them." The Battle of Sol's Gate began when the hegemony fleet reached the outer edge of human space. Emperor Zavan, commanding from his ancient throne aboard the Inevitable, opened communications with the small human force that dared to oppose him. "Admiral Morrison," the Emperor's translated voice boomed across space, "you face the combined might of the oldest civilization in this galaxy. My empire ruled 1,000,000 worlds when your species was learning to make fire. Surrender now, and I will grant your people the honor of serving as slaves in my household. Continue this madness, and I will erase humanity from the history of the universe." Morrison's reply was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every being in both fleets could hear his words. "Emperor Zavan, your reputation precedes you. The hegemony has indeed ruled this galaxy for millions of years, and in all that time, you have learned to mistake age for wisdom, size for strength, and tradition for innovation." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "Today you will learn the difference between being old and being obsolete. The hegemony attack began with weapons that operated beyond the understanding of most galactic species. Reality bombs deleted sections of space where human ships had been moments before. Time lances struck at human vessels in the past, attempting to destroy them before the battle began. Dimensional cannons fired through parallel universes to bypass any possible defense. The human ships, absorbed every attack, and continued flying forward as if nothing had happened. Captain. Hughes stared at his tactical displays in amazement. Admiral, their weapons are having absolutely no effect on our defensive systems. The temporal attacks are being redirected into pocket dimensions. The reality bombs are being absorbed and converted into shield energy. Even their dimensional weapons are being neutralized by our space-time anchors. Morrison had expected this result, but seeing humanity's ultimate defensive technology in action against the galaxy's most advanced weapons was still impressive. Thank you, Captain. Now show the Emperor what human weapons can do when we stop pretending to be a young species. The Retribution fired a single shot from its primary weapon system. The beam that emerged was not made of energy or matter, but of pure information. It struck the Hegemony flagship's reality-warping shields and simply convinced them that they did not exist. The defenses that had protected the inevitable for millions of years vanished like a bad dream, Emperor. Zavon felt his ancient ship shudder as human weapons began to affect systems that had been considered invulnerable since before Earth's sun formed. How is this possible? He demanded of his crew. Our shields are based on fundamental principles of reality itself. The answer came in the form of Admiral Morrison's voice, somehow bypassing every security system on the Hegemony flagship and speaking directly into the Emperor's private chambers. Your Majesty, reality is not as fundamental as your species believed. Humans have learned to reprogram the basic operating systems of the universe. Your shields exist because the cosmos believes they should exist. We have simply changed the cosmos's mind. Around the inevitable, the other 99 human ships demonstrated the full extent of humanity's secret weapons development. Ships that had seemed impossible to damage were torn apart by weapons that rewrote the laws of physics in localized areas. Ancient hegemony vessels found their own weapons turning against them, as human computer viruses infected systems that predated biological evolution. Reality bombers that could destroy star systems were neutralized by human devices that convinced them to be harmless transport vessels instead. But perhaps most terrifying of all was humanity's ability to simply ignore attacks that should have been unstoppable. Hegemony weapons that operated outside normal spacetime found themselves unable to affect human ships that existed in dimensions the ancient empire had never discovered. Time lances that struck at human vessels in the past discovered that humanity had already fought and won those battles in timeline branches that had not yet become real. Within hours, the largest military force in galactic history was reduced to scattered debris and fleeing survivors. The Hegemony, rulers of the galaxy for 10 million years, had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as primitive children. Emperor Zavon found himself transported to the bridge of the Retribution, standing before Admiral Morrison in a demonstration of technology that made his ancient empire's achievements seem like toys built by children. The human admiral looked exactly as calm and composed as he had at the beginning of the battle. Emperor Zavon, Morrison said, your empire has ruled this galaxy through fear and superior technology for millions of years. Today that ends. You and your surviving forces will return to hegemony space and begin the immediate release of every slave species under your control. Morrison stepped closer, and Zavon could see something in the human's eyes that made his compound vision blur with instinctive terror. Your Majesty, 6 months after the Battle of Saul's Gate, the Galactic Council met for what everyone understood would be its final session under the old system. The great chamber that had once echoed with the confident voices of galactic powers now held only the whispered conversations of species, learning to navigate a universe where humanity had become the dominant force. Empty seats marked the absence of governments that had simply ceased to exist when their leaders refused to accept the new reality. Admiral Jake Morrison entered the chamber not as a petitioner seeking favors, but as the representative of Earth's new Terran Federation. Behind him walked former Emperor Zavon, his massive insectoid form now bearing the simple identification badge of a Federation advisor on galactic affairs. The sight of the galaxy's former master following obediently behind a human sent a clear message to every species present about how completely the balance of power had shifted. Chairman Mordak sat heavily on his ancient throne, his turtle-like shell showing stress fractures that had not been there before humanity's rise to dominance. The old being's voice was quiet and careful when he spoke, no longer carrying the casual authority it had possessed for centuries. Admiral Morrison, Mordak said slowly, The Galactic Council recognizes the Terran Federation's new status in galactic affairs. We understand that humanity now holds the dominant position in this region of space. What are your intentions regarding the existing governmental structures? Morrison looked around the chamber at the assembled alien representatives. Some were species that had ruled star systems for millennia. Others were newer civilizations that had barely achieved interstellar travel before humanity's revelation. All of them were waiting to learn their fate under the new order that Earth was creating. Honored members, Morrison began, though the word honored now carried very different implications. Humanity does not seek to replace one form of tyranny with another. We have studied the history of this galaxy for 50 years, and we have seen the patterns that repeat themselves across time. Strong species enslave weak ones. Ancient empires crush younger civilizations. The powerful treat the powerless as disposable resources. He activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with star maps spanning the entire galaxy. Red zones marked regions where entire species had been wiped out by conquest. Yellow areas showed worlds where slave populations outnumbered free citizens. Green spaces indicated the handful of systems where species had been allowed to develop without interference. The Krex Dominion alone has destroyed 47 intelligent species in the last century. Morrison continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. The Veltari Empire has enslaved entire stellar regions, treating billions of sentient beings as property. The hegemony has used younger civilizations as test subjects for their weapons development for 10 million years. Admiral Lisa Park stepped forward to stand beside Morrison. She had been promoted to serve as his deputy in the new Federation government, and her presence represented humanity's commitment to the changes they were implementing across the galaxy. Earth's new policy is straightforward, Park announced. Any species that wishes to exist peacefully will be protected from aggression. Any species that chooses to attack others will be stopped permanently. Any government that has committed genocide or maintained slave populations has 30 days to make full reparations and release all captive peoples. The Zephyrian ambassador, his crystalline form now dim with worry instead of sparkling with confidence, chimed nervously. Admiral Morrison, surely some accommodation can be reached. The current system has maintained stability for millions of years. Change on this scale could lead to chaos across the galaxy. Morrison's response was calm but final. Ambassador, your idea of stability was built on the suffering of species too weak to defend themselves. That is not stability. That is systematic oppression disguised as natural law. To demonstrate humanity's commitment to their new policies, Morrison activated a brief display of human technology. Every ship in orbit around the Council world appeared on internal sensors as if they had somehow materialized inside the planet's core. For exactly 10 seconds, every delegate experienced what it would feel like if humanity chose to be unfriendly. The sensation was terrifying, but it ended quickly, leaving the aliens with a clear understanding of their position in the new galactic order. You will not refuse these changes, Morrison said quietly as the demonstration ended, because you are all intelligent beings who can learn from the examples of those who thought they could resist humanity's new policies. Over the following weeks, the galaxy watched as the new order took effect with remarkable speed and efficiency. Species that had ruled through fear for millions of years suddenly found themselves accountable to the civilizations they had oppressed. The great slave markets that had operated openly for centuries were shut down permanently. The tribute fleets that had extracted wealth from weaker species were disbanded, their ships converted to aid vessels or recycled into useful materials. But humanity's rule was not simply punitive or destructive. Captain Ryan Cross, the hero of the first battle with the Krex Dominion, now commanded the Terran Federation's humanitarian fleets. Species that had been ground down by centuries of oppression suddenly found themselves receiving advanced technology, abundant resources, and protection from their former human enemies. The transformation is remarkable, Cross explained to his crew as they delivered manufacturing equipment to a world recently liberated from Veltari rule. These people had been enslaved for so long they had forgotten what freedom looked like. Now they're building their own cities, developing their own technology, creating their own culture for the first time in generations. Lieutenant Amy Stone, now promoted to commander and serving as Cross's second-in-command, studied reports from across the galaxy. Captain, we're receiving thank you messages from over 3,000 species that have been freed from various forms of oppression. Most of them never even knew that other ways of life were possible. Cross nodded, though his expression remained thoughtful. Commander, freedom is easy to give but hard to maintain. These species will need time to learn how to govern themselves, how to defend their independence, how to build societies based on cooperation instead of domination. On Earth, in the newly constructed Terran Federation headquarters, Admiral Morrison stood before a massive display wall showing communication feeds from across the galaxy. Thousands of species were sending messages of gratitude, requests for aid, offers of cooperation, and reports of progress in building free societies. But mixed among the positive communications were warnings and intelligence reports that reminded Morrison that humanity's work was far from finished. "Sir," Admiral Park said as she joined Morrison at the display wall, "our deep space monitoring stations are detecting unusual activity in the dark sectors beyond the former hegemony borders. It appears that humanity's rise to dominance has attracted attention from some very old neighbors." Morrison studied the sensor readings that showed massive energy signatures, moving in regions of space that had been considered empty for millions of years. Ancient civilizations that went into hiding when the current galactic powers were still young? "That seems to be the most likely explanation," Park replied. "Our xenoarchaeology teams believe these might be species that predated the hegemony by millions of years. They may have been sleeping, waiting, or simply observing from a distance while younger civilizations fought over territory they considered insignificant." Morrison nodded, unsurprised by this development. Humanity had always known that the galaxy was older and more complex than the known civilizations suggested. Their scientists had found evidence of technologies and structures that predated any known species by eons. It had always been a question of when, not if, these ancient powers would reveal themselves. "Admiral," Morrison said, "how are our preparation programs progressing?" Park smiled with the same confidence that had carried humanity through its transformation, from galactic underdogs to dominant power. "Sir, our research and development facilities are operating at full capacity. We've incorporated technology samples from every species we've defeated, and our AI systems have extrapolated dozens of potential advancement paths. If these ancient civilizations want to challenge humanity's new order, they'll find us ready." Morrison looked out through the headquarters' main viewing window at the Earth below, where billions of humans continued their lives in cities that now served as the capital of galactic civilization. Children played in parks while their parents worked on projects that would reshape the future of hundreds of species. It was a peaceful scene, but Morrison knew that peace was something humanity had earned through strength, not something they could take for granted. "The galaxy learned one important lesson from our rise to power," Morrison said quietly. "Humanity warned them once that we were holding back our true capabilities. We proved that our restraint was not weakness, and our compliance with their rules was not submission." He turned away from the window and looked at the star maps that showed human influence spreading to every corner of known space. Now these ancient civilizations are stirring, probably believing they can challenge us the same way the younger SP